Elias Chun stepped off the transport shuttle and took his first breath of recycled station air, and the smell hit him like a wall of old metal and strange spices, and something he could not name at all. Korvath Station hung in the darkness of space like a massive wheel made of steel and glass and hope, spinning slowly around a dying red star that painted everything in shades of rust and blood. He was just a cargo technician from Earth, nobody special, nobody important. Just a man with calloused hands and curious eyes, who had signed up for a 6-month rotation because the pay was good and he wanted to see what lay beyond his small blue planet. The docking bay buzzed with activity as aliens of every shape and size moved past him like water flowing around a stone. And Elias stood there with his single bag over his shoulder and watched them all with wonder in his heart. A tall creature with 4 arms and skin like polished copper stopped beside him and looked down with eyes that had no pupils at all. "Human," the creature said, in a voice that sounded like gravel grinding together. "You are new here, yes?" "Yes," Elias replied with a small smile. "First day on the station." The creature made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a warning, and Elias could not tell which one it was. "Then listen well, small human," the creature continued. "Stick to the sectors marked safe for your kind. Do not bother the crystallines when they are singing. Never eat the purple fruit from Thevendari Market. And most importantly, stay away from Deck 47. Elias tilted his head and felt curiosity spark inside his chest like a small flame catching dry wood. "What is on Deck 47? He asked. The creature's copper skin seemed to ripple and shift, and its 4 arms crossed over its broad chest in what looked like discomfort. "Nothing you need to know about," it said quickly. "Nothing at all. Just forget I mentioned it and go find your quarters, human." And then the creature was gone, vanishing into the crowd like it had never been there at all. And Elias stood alone with questions burning in his mind. His supervisor was a short alien named Greth, who had too many teeth and not enough patience, and she showed him around the cargo bays with quick gestures and quicker words. "You move boxes here. You scan them there. You do not ask questions about what is inside them. And you do not cause trouble," Greth explained while her many teeth clicked together. "Can you do that, human?" "I can do that," Elias agreed. But his mind was still thinking about Deck 47 and the way the copper alien had looked so uncomfortable when it spoke those words. Over the next few days, Elias worked hard and kept his head down and learned the rhythms of the station. But he also listened carefully to every conversation around him. He heard aliens speak of trade deals and old grudges and lovers left behind on distant worlds. But whenever he asked about Deck 47, something strange would happen. The aliens would go quiet, and their eyes would look away, and their bodies would shift like they wanted to be anywhere else in the universe. "We do not speak of that place," a Vendari merchant told him with fear in her voice. "Some things are better left forgotten," a crystalline hummed while its glass-like body chimed with unease. "Why do you ask so many questions, human?" Greth demanded one evening with suspicion in her eyes. "Are you trying to cause problems on my station?" Elias raised his hands and shook his head and promised he was just curious. But the question would not leave him alone, and it followed him into his dreams at night. One evening, after his shift ended and the cargo bays fell silent, Elias made his way to a maintenance terminal in a quiet corner of the station. He was not supposed to access certain files, but humans had always been good at finding ways around rules that did not make sense to them. His fingers moved across the glowing screen as he searched through maintenance logs and life support records and crew manifests that went back hundreds of years. And then he found it. Deck 47 had been sealed off exactly 200 station years ago, but the life support systems there were still running strong and steady. Someone or something lived there, alone in the darkness, breathing recycled air and eating recycled nutrients. The log showed that no visitor had been recorded for that entire time, not one single soul in 200 years. Elias felt his heart squeeze tight in his chest as he read those words again and again. 200 years of solitude. 200 years without a friendly face or a kind word, or even the simple touch of another living being. He thought about what that kind of loneliness might feel like, and the thought made something ache deep inside him. He knew he should leave it alone and mind his own business and focus on his work like Greth had told him. But Elias had never been very good at leaving things alone, and his mother had always said that his curiosity would either save him or destroy him one day. He found himself walking toward the central lift before he even realized what he was doing, and his feet carried him forward like they had a mind of their own. The lift doors opened with a soft hiss, and he stepped inside the small metal box that could take him anywhere on the station. His finger hovered over the control panel, and he could see the button for Deck 47 glowing faintly in the dim light. He pressed it. The station AI spoke immediately in a voice that sounded calm but carried a warning underneath its words. Passenger interaction with subject Vethnal is inadvisable, the AI announced. Psychological contamination risk is rated as severe. Physical harm risk is rated as minimal. Emotional trauma risk is rated as extreme. Do you wish to proceed? Elias took a deep breath and thought about the lonely soul waiting in the darkness above him. Yes, he said firmly. I want to proceed. The lift began to move upward, and Elias watched the deck numbers climb higher and higher. He did not know what he would find when those doors opened again. He did not know if he was being brave or foolish, or maybe both at the same time. But he knew one thing for certain, and that knowledge burned bright in his chest like a star that refused to die. Nobody deserved to be alone for 200 years, and if everyone else on this station had forgotten that simple truth, then maybe it was time for a human to remind them. The lift slowed to a stop. The doors began to open, and Elias Chund stepped forward into the unknown. The door slid open and cold air rushed over Elias like the breath of something ancient and forgotten, and he shivered as he took his first step onto Deck 47. The corridor stretched before him in near darkness, lit only by emergency lights that flickered with a tired orange glow, and dust motes danced in the dim light like tiny ghosts. But what caught his breath was the beauty of it all. Bioluminescent moss had spread across the walls and ceiling over the long years of neglect, painting everything in soft shades of blue and green and purple that pulsed gently like a slow heartbeat. The air smelled old and forgotten, like a room in a house where no one had lived for many, many years. But underneath that staleness was something else. Something that smelled like rain on distant worlds and flowers that bloomed in eternal twilight. Elias walked slowly down the corridor, and his footsteps echoed in the silence like the ticking of a clock that had been counting down for centuries. He passed empty rooms filled with nothing but dust and shadows, and he passed windows that looked out into the vast darkness of space where stars burned cold and distant. "Hello?" He called out, and his voice sounded strange in this place, too loud and too alive for the silence that lived here. There was no answer. He walked further into the darkness, following the faint glow of the moss, trusting his feet to carry him where he needed to go. And then he turned a corner and stopped breathing. The creature stood in the center of a large room, tall and thin and wrapped in shadows that moved and shifted like living things. It had too many eyes, perhaps 7 or 8 or maybe more, and they glowed with a soft violet light that seemed to see right through him and into the deepest parts of his soul. Its body was humanoid, but wrong in ways that his mind struggled to understand, with limbs that were too long and joints that bent in directions they should not bend. The shadows that clung to it were not clothes or skin, but something else entirely. Something that writhed and whispered and seemed to drink in the faint light around them. This was Vethnal, the Silithari, the Forgotten One, the creature that the entire station had locked away and tried to forget. Elias expected many things in that moment. He expected the creature to attack him or scream at him or drive him away with terrible power. But what happened was something he never could have predicted. The Scifistory froze completely, and its many eyes went wide with an emotion that Elias recognized instantly because he had felt it himself so many times before. It was shock, pure and simple, the shock of someone who had given up all hope of ever seeing another face again. "You," the creature said, and its voice was like wind moving through dead leaves, dry and ancient and full of wonder. "You came here. Why did you come here?" Elias swallowed hard and found his voice somewhere in the tight place his throat had become. "I heard someone lived alone on this deck," he said simply. "I wanted to see if that was true." The Scifistory made a sound that might have been a laugh if laughs could sound so broken and so sad. "Alone," it repeated. "Yes, alone for 200 years. Alone because that is what they wanted. Alone because that is what I deserve." Elias felt something wash over him then, a wave of emotion so strong that it nearly knocked him off his feet. Loneliness hit him first, a loneliness so deep and so vast that it felt like drowning in an ocean with no bottom and no shore. Then came grief, the grief of someone who had lost everything and everyone they ever loved. Then came despair, black and heavy and suffocating, the despair of someone who had stopped believing that anything would ever change. Elias gasped and stumbled backward, and tears sprang to his eyes without his permission. "You feel it now," Bethnal said with something like resignation in its ancient voice. "You feel what I feel. That is why they put me here. That is why they all stay away. My kind reflects the emotions of others, but we also share our own. And mine are too heavy for anyone to carry." The Scifistory turned away from him, and its shadowy form seemed to shrink into itself with shame. "Go back to your people, human," it said quietly. "Go back and forget you ever found me. That is what everyone else did. That is what you should do too." Elias stood there gasping, fighting against the waves of borrowed sorrow that crashed through his mind, and every instinct in his body screamed at him to run away and never come back. But Elias Chun had never been very good at listening to his instincts. He took a deep breath and wiped the tears from his face and forced his shaking legs to carry him forward instead of backward. "No," he said firmly. Bethnal's many eyes turned back to him with confusion glowing in their violet depths. "No?" it repeated like the word was strange and foreign. "No," Elias said again. "I am not going to run away and forget about you. I came here to meet you, and that is exactly what I am going to do." He walked over to a dusty bench that sat against one wall, and he sat down heavily and pulled his bag off his shoulder. From inside the bag, he pulled out a simple ration bar, the kind that humans ate when they had no time for proper meals. He broke the bar in half and held one piece out toward the Scifistory. "My name is Elias," he said with a small smile, despite the tears still wet on his cheeks. "I was wondering if you might want to share lunch with me?" Bethnal stared at him. All of its eyes blinked in a sequence that moved from left to right like a wave rolling across its shadowed face. "You are strange," it said finally. "You are so very strange, human." "I have been told that before," Elias admitted with a shrug. "The emotions I carry would break most minds," Bethnal warned. "They would shatter you from the inside out if you stay here too long." "Then I guess we better start with a short lunch," Elias replied, still holding out the ration bar. "Maybe tomorrow we can try a longer one." The Scifistory took one hesitant step toward him, then another, moving like someone who had forgotten how to be near another living creature. With trembling fingers made of shadow and starlight, Bethnal reached out and took the offered food. And for the first time in 200 years, they were not alone. The days turned into weeks, and Elias kept his promise. Every evening after his shift ended, he would make his way to the central lift and press the button for Deck 47. And every evening, the station eye would warn him about psychological contamination and emotional trauma. And every evening he would say yes anyway. Vethnal waited for him in the moss-covered darkness, and Elias could see that the Silithari had started waiting near the lift doors, eager for his arrival in a way that made his heart ache with both happiness and sadness. "You came back again," Vethnal would say each time, and each time the wonder in their voice was just as fresh as it had been on the first day. "I told you I would," Elias would reply with a smile. "Humans are stubborn like that." They would sit together in the room with the glowing moss, and Elias would share his ration bars, or sometimes real food that he had bought from the station markets, and they would talk. Vethnal told him about the Silithari, about how their people had once been great diplomats and healers, who used their emotional powers to bring peace and understanding between warring species. "We could feel what others felt," Vethnal explained with a voice full of ancient memory. "And we could share what we felt in return, and in that sharing, enemies would become friends and hatred would become understanding." "What happened?" Elias asked softly. The wave of grief that hit him nearly stole his breath away. "We felt too much," Vethnal answered. "We carried too much pain from too many wars and too many losses. And the sorrow built up inside us like water behind a dam. And when we shared ourselves with others, we shared that sorrow too. And they could not handle it," Elias said, understanding now. "No," Vethnal agreed. "They could not handle seeing their own fears and griefs reflected back at them, mixed with all the pain we had collected over the centuries. They called us dangerous. They called us monsters. They locked us away one by one until only I remained." The loneliness washed over Elias then, 200 years of isolation pressing down on his chest like a weight made of darkness and forgotten dreams. He closed his eyes and let the tears fall and did not fight against the emotion. "That sounds terrible," he said when he could speak again. "I am so sorry that happened to you." Vethnal made that broken laugh sound again, but this time there was something different in it, something almost like hope trying to push through the despair. "You are strange," the Silithari said for perhaps the 100th time. "Any other creature would have run away by now. Any other creature would have begged me to stop sharing my pain with them. My people have a saying," Elias told them with a crooked grin. "We say that a burden shared is a burden halved. Maybe if I help you carry some of this weight, it will not feel so heavy anymore." The other aliens on the station thought Elias had lost his mind. Greth confronted him one morning in the cargo bay with her many teeth bared in anger and concern. "I know where you go every night," she hissed at him. "I know you visit that creature on deck 47. Are you trying to destroy yourself, human?" "I am trying to help someone who needs a friend," Elias replied calmly. "That thing is not capable of friendship," Greth insisted. "It only knows how to spread misery and pain. You will return one day with your mind broken and your spirit crushed. And I will have to explain to your people how I let a human go insane on my station." Elias shook his head. "You had her wrong," he said. "Vethnal does not spread misery on purpose. They just reflect what they feel, and right now they feel lonely and sad and forgotten. The feelings can change." Greth threw her forearms up in frustration and walked away, muttering about foolish humans and their foolish hearts. A Kovathi merchant stopped Elias in the market one day, a tall being with scales that shifted colors like oil on water. "I have heard the rumors," the merchant said with narrowed eyes. "You visit the Silithari regularly. You sit with it and share meals with it like it was a normal person. Why would you poison yourself with that creature's sorrow?" Elias looked at the merchant and felt a spark of anger light up in his chest. "Because no one should be that alone," he said firmly. "Because someone has to care. Because maybe if your people had shown a little bit of compassion 200 years ago, none of this would have happened." The merchant stepped back with shock on their scaled face, and Elias walked away before he could say something he might regret. But something was changing on Deck 47, something that filled Elias with hope. As he continued his visits, as he continued sharing meals and stories and simple human companionship, Vethnal began to change. The waves of despair that hit Elias when he arrived grew smaller and less overwhelming. And mixed in with the ancient sorrow, he started to feel something else, something new. He felt curiosity, the curiosity of someone remembering what it felt like to learn new things. He felt warmth, the warmth of friendship growing where only emptiness had been before. He felt hope, small and fragile but real, pushing up through the darkness like a flower growing through cracked stone. "You are doing something to me," Vethnal said one evening with wonder in their voice. "You are changing what I feel." "I am not doing anything special," Elias said with a laugh. "I am just being here." "But that is exactly what is so special," Vethnal replied. "You bring your emotions with you when you come. Your curiosity, and your stubbornness, and your ridiculous human hope. And I feel them, and they become part of me." The Silithari's many eyes glowed brighter than Elias had ever seen them. "For 200 years, I only had my own despair to reflect," Vethnal continued. "But now I have your hope too, and your hope is very loud, human. It drowns out the darkness like a light that refuses to go out." Elias felt tears prick at his eyes again, but these were different tears. These were tears of joy. "Human," Vethnal said softly, "why is your kind not run from pain?" Elias thought about the question carefully. "I think," he said slowly, "it is because we know that pain does not last forever. We know that even the darkest night eventually ends. And we know that sometimes the only way to help someone who is hurting is to sit with them in the darkness until the dawn comes." Vethnal was quiet for a long moment. "I think I would like to see a dawn again someday," they whispered. "Then that is exactly what we will work toward," Elias promised. "Together." Word spread across Korvath Station like fire through dry grass. And soon everyone was talking about the strange human who visited the Forbidden Deck. In the trading halls and the sleeping quarters, in the restaurants and the cargo bays, aliens of every species whispered to each other with fear and fascination in their voices. The human goes to see the Silithari every single day. He has been doing it for weeks and his mind has not broken yet. Perhaps humans are immune to emotional contamination? Perhaps the human is simply insane. Elias tried to ignore the stares and the whispers, but they followed him everywhere he went like shadows that would not leave him alone. Some aliens looked at him with disgust, like he had done something shameful and wrong. Others looked at him with pity, like he was a doomed man walking toward his own destruction. But a few, just a small handful, looked at him with something that might have been curiosity or even respect. One evening, a young crystalline approached him as he waited for the lift to Deck 47. The crystalline was beautiful in the way that broken glass is beautiful, with a body made of living crystal that chimed softly whenever they moved. "Human," the crystalline said in a voice like singing bells, "is it true what they say about you?" "That depends on what they say," Elias replied with a tired smile. "They say you have befriended the Silithari," the crystalline continued. "They say you sit with them and share meals with them and feel their emotions without running away." "That is true," Elias confirmed. The crystalline's crystal body flickered with colors that Elias could not name. "I have always wondered about the one on Deck 47, they admitted softly. "My grandmother told me stories about the Silithari when I was young. She said they were once great healers who helped people understand each other. I always thought it was sad that everyone forgot how to be near them." "Would you like to meet Vethnal?" Elias asked suddenly. The crystalline's body chimed with what sounded like alarm. "I could not," they said quickly. "The council would be furious. It is forbidden to visit Deck 47. "The council does not have to know," Elias said with a grin. "And I think Vethnal would enjoy meeting someone new." The crystalline thought for a long moment while their crystal body shifted through a rainbow of uncertain colors. "Perhaps someday," they finally said, "when I am braver." But not everyone on the station was curious or uncertain. 3 days later, Elias was summoned to appear before the station council. The council chamber was a massive room at the very heart of Korvath Station, filled with representatives from every major species that used the station for trade and travel. Elias stood alone in the center of the room while dozens of alien eyes stared down at him from elevated seats arranged in a circle. High Counselor Veth, a massive being with skin like stone and a voice like thunder, spoke first. "Human designation Elias Chen," the High Counselor boomed. "You have been visiting the quarantined area known as Deck 47. Is this correct?" "It is correct," Elias answered firmly. "You have been interacting with the dangerous entity known as Vethnal," the High Counselor continued, despite repeated warnings about the psychological risks. "I have been visiting my friend," Elias corrected, "and Vethnal is not dangerous." A murmur rippled through the council chamber. The Silithari was quarantined for the safety of all species on this station, the High Counselor declared. Its emotional contamination poses a threat to the mental stability of everyone here. "With respect, High Counselor," Elias said, keeping his voice calm even though his heart was pounding. "That is not true. Vethnal has been alone for 200 years and has never hurt anyone. You did not quarantine them because they were dangerous. You quarantined them because you were afraid." "Afraid?" the High Counselor repeated with anger in their stony voice. "Afraid of feeling your own emotions reflected back at you," Elias continued. "Afraid of facing your own fears and griefs and regrets. The Silithari are mirrors. And you did not like what you saw when you looked into them." The council chamber erupted in angry voices and shouting. Elias stood his ground and waited for the noise to die down. "Enough!" the High Counselor thundered. And silence fell like a heavy blanket. "Human, your actions have put this station at risk. Worse, your actions have given other foolish creatures ideas. We have received reports that several individuals have expressed interest in visiting Deck 47 because of your example." "Good," Elias said simply. The High Counselor's stone face twisted with fury. "The Council will vote on this matter," they announced. "We will decide whether to permanently seal Deck 47 and end this foolishness once and for all." Elias felt ice form in his chest. "You cannot do that," he protested. "Vethnal is a living being with thoughts and feelings and hopes. You cannot just lock them away forever." "The Council can do whatever is necessary to protect this station," the High Counselor replied coldly. "You have one standard cycle to say your goodbyes, human. After that, Deck 47 will be sealed, and you will be forbidden from any further contact with the entity." Elias opened his mouth to argue more, but 2 security guards were already moving toward him to escort him out. He went without resisting, but his mind was racing with desperate thoughts. When he reached Deck 47 that evening, Vethnal was waiting for him, and Elias could feel the anxiety radiating from the Silithari like heat from a fire. "I felt the fear in the station," Vethnal said quietly. "Something bad has happened?" Elias sat down heavily and told them everything. Elias sat down heavily and told them everything. When he finished, Vethnal was silent for a long time. "Perhaps it is for the best," they finally said, and the despair in their voice made Elias want to weep. "Perhaps I was foolish to hope that anything could change." "No," Elias said fiercely. "We are not giving up. There has to be a way to change their minds." "How?" Vethnal asked. Elias thought hard, and then an idea began to form in his mind, crazy and dangerous and probably impossible. But humans had always been good at doing impossible things. "I have a plan," he said slowly, "but you are going to have to trust me." "I trust you," Vethnal replied without hesitation. You are the first person to give me a reason to trust anyone in 200 years. Alias reached out and took their shadowy hand in his. Then let us show them what you really are, he said, with determination burning in his eyes. The council chamber fell silent when the doors opened and Elias Chun walked in. But the silence became something deeper, something almost sacred, when the council members saw who walked beside him. Vethnal entered the chamber for the first time in 200 years, their shadowy form moving slowly and carefully, like someone who had forgotten how to walk among others. Their many violet eyes looked around at the assembled aliens with a mixture of fear and hope and desperate courage. What is the meaning of this? High Counselor Veth demanded, rising from their stone seat with anger carved into every line of their face. I have brought Vethnal to speak for themselves, Elias announced, his voice steady even though his hands were shaking. You have spent 2 centuries deciding their fate without ever giving them a chance to be heard. I think it is time that changed. This is outrageous, a Korvathi counselor shouted. The creature should not be outside of quarantine. Guards, remove them immediately. But before the guards could move, something happened that made everyone in the chamber freeze. Vethnal began to glow. The soft violet light of their eyes spread outward through their shadowy body, growing brighter and warmer until they looked like a living star wrapped in darkness. And then the emotion hit. But it was not the crushing despair that everyone had expected. It was not the overwhelming grief or the drowning loneliness or any of the dark feelings that had made the Silithari so feared. Instead, it was warmth. It was hope. It was the stubborn, foolish, unbreakable love that a simple human cargo technician had brought to a forgotten soul in a dark and dusty corner of the station. The council members gasped as the feelings washed over them. A crystalline representative began to chime with surprised joy. A Vendari merchant wiped tears from their 3 eyes with trembling hands. Even High Counselor Veth sat back down slowly, their stone face softening with an expression that looked almost like wonder. What is this? The High Counselor whispered. This is what I feel now, Vethnal said, and their voice was stronger than Elias had ever heard it. This is what the human gave me when everyone else gave me nothing but isolation and fear. Vethnal stepped forward, and their shadow-wrapped form seemed to grow taller and more solid. For 200 years, I reflected only my own sorrow, they continued. For 200 years, I had nothing inside me but pain and loneliness. And when you looked at me, that is all you could see. Your own fears made worse by my despair. But this human, Vethnal turned to look at Elias with all their glowing eyes. This small and stubborn and impossibly brave human. He came to me when no one else would. He sat with me in my darkness. He shared his meals and his stories and his ridiculous human hope. The warmth in the chamber grew stronger, and Elias could see aliens all around the room beginning to smile. The Silithari were never monsters, Vethnal declared. We were mirrors, and mirrors can only show what is put in front of them. You filled me with your fear, and I reflected fear. You filled me with your rejection, and I reflected despair. Vethnal raised their shadow-wrapped arms toward the ceiling. But this human filled me with compassion, they said, their voice ringing like a bell. He filled me with friendship and hope and the belief that things could change, and now that is what I reflect. The young crystalline that Elias had spoken to was weeping openly now, their crystal body chiming a beautiful melody. I remember the stories, they called out. My grandmother told me about the Silithari healers. She said they used to help people find peace. They locked you away because they were afraid, Elias added, stepping up to stand beside Vethnal. They were afraid of their own emotions, so they blamed the one who could feel them. He looked around at all the alien faces. But fear does not have to win. He continued, where I come from, we have learned that the hardest thing in the universe is not fighting or building or exploring. The hardest thing is being kind to someone who scares you. and Vethnal never deserved to be feared. High Counselor Veth stood again, and their expression had changed completely. "Human," they said slowly, "you have done something that we could not do in 2 centuries. You have shown us who the Silithari truly are." The Stone Counselor turned to look at their fellow council members. "I move that we overturn the quarantine order," they announced. "I move that Vethnal be allowed to live freely on this station, with the same rights as any other resident." One by one, the council members raised their hands or tentacles or appendages in agreement. The vote was unanimous. Vethnal stood in the center of the chamber, and Elias could feel the waves of disbelief and joy and gratitude pouring off them like sunlight breaking through clouds. "It is over," Vethnal whispered. "After all this time, it is finally over." "No," Elias said with a smile. "It is not over. It is just beginning." Later that day, Elias and Vethnal stood together at a viewport near the main promenade. It was the first time in 200 years that Vethnal had seen the stars from anywhere but their lonely deck. Ships came and went in the distance, carrying travelers and traders and dreamers to 1,000 different worlds. The red giant star that Korvath Station orbited painted everything in warm shades of amber and rust. "It is beautiful," Vethnal said softly. "I had forgotten how beautiful the universe could be." Aliens walked past them on the promenade, and some of them stopped to stare. But the stares were different now. Some were curious, some were uncertain, but none of them were afraid. A few brave souls even smiled and waved. "Elias," Vethnal said, turning to look at the human who had changed everything. "Why did you do it? Why did you say hello to me that first day? Why did you come to Deck 47 when everyone else stayed away?" Elias shrugged his shoulders. "Where I come from," he said simply, "that is just what you do when someone is alone. You say hello, you reach out, you try to help." Vethnal's many eyes shimmered with emotion. "Then your kind must be very brave," they said, "or very foolish." Elias laughed out loud. "Little of both, probably," he admitted. Vethnal made that sound that had once been a broken laugh, but was now something lighter and warmer. "I am glad that your people are foolish," they said. "I am glad that you were foolish enough to find me." Elias put his hand on the Silithari's shoulder, feeling the strange warmth of their shadow-wrapped form. "The galaxy can be a cold and lonely place," he said, "but it does not have to be. All it takes is for someone to reach out. All it takes is for someone to say hello." They stood together at the viewport, a human and a Silithari, 2 beings from different worlds who had found each other in the darkness. And somewhere on the station, a young crystalline was making their way toward them with hopeful chimes and a brave heart. The dawn was coming, and it was beautiful.